Lab 23, vApps and clusters. So this lab we're specifically doing using the web client. So let's go ahead and log in. And most of our work this time is going to be done on ESXi 2. And we're going to go ahead and be creating a virtual app. Going to allow the connection through. So right now we should have two XP machines, XP Pro A and XP Pro B. So let's go ahead and double check that. I'm going to go ahead and maximize my window. We have our A, we have our B, so that's good. Let's go ahead and go to hosts and clusters. We're going to go ahead and drill down. We're going to go ahead and drill to our ESXi 2. And we are going to all VM actions. And we are going to do a new vApp. We are going to create a new vApp. We're going to call it my vApp. And we're going to place it in our training data center. For our resource pool for our vApp, we're going to leave all the defaults for now. We're going to verify our resource pool, and that all looks good, so we're going to go ahead and finish it. Okay, so that should allow us to create our vApp. Now we actually have what looks like a little 4-leaf clover vApp. So I'm going to go ahead and expand out both of my hosts, and I want to migrate both XP A and B to one host. So what I did was I just dragged and dropped it. I want to change the host. You can also right click and migrate. That way both of the machines are on the same physical host. And while that's moving, what we're going to do is we're actually going to drill down on my vApp. And we're going to select both of them and put them in my vApp. Just like that. Now it is kind of laggy with the web client, so you can always just right click and migrate them to your vApp as well. So let's go ahead, and now that we have our vApp and we have virtual machines in there, let's go ahead and edit the settings for our vApp. So one thing that we want to do is we actually want to do two different groups. So let's click on start order. Make sure that group 1 is XP Pro and group 2 as XP Pro, or group 2 is XP Pro A, group 1 is XP Pro B. So on both of our hosts, what we're going to do is we're going to do a power on. Let's go ahead and maximize our window so we have a little bit better view. So we want to startup sequence proceeds. Let's go and change that to 20 second. And shutdown, guest shutdown. And we're going to do that for both of them. 20 and guest shutdown. Okay, so we are done. So let's go and click on OK. Let's go and power on our vApp. Notice that it should power on XP Pro B and then XP Pro A. That's because it will power on group 1, then group 2. Okay, so once they're already all powered on, let's go ahead and power them off. And you'll notice they'll power off in reverse. They'll power off A, then B, because it powers on groups 1, 2, and then it will power off groups 2, then 1. That way the primary comes on first and goes offline last. Okay, so that's... When people think vApp, they think a virtual application, and that's not always the case. vApp actually is a cluster or group of VMs for specific tasks that run a host a specific item. That way we can centralize the sharing of those resources with one area. We cannot delete our vApp once it's populated, so we actually have to migrate our machines off of it before we can delete it. So there, our vApp has nothing, so we're actually going to go ahead and delete our vApp. So delete from disk. Our machines are still there, but our vApp is gone. Okay, so our next task is cluster creation and configuration. It's important that we understand reservation and limits though. The best way to understand these two terms is with an example. Let's assume that we allocate 2 gigs of memory to a VM, and we set the reservation to 512 megs, and a limit of 1 gig. First note, the limit is a hard value. Even though we allocated 2 gigs, we say that it has a limit of 1 gig. Even though we've set it so that it could use 2, we set a hard limit of 1 gig. That way it will never go above our 1 gig limit. Our reservation pre-allocates that much memory to that machine. That way when it powers on, it's guaranteed to receive its reservation. Keep in mind, we can balloon resources, but our reservations provide some form of guarantee to our items. So we're going to go ahead and, first of all, I'm not going to do this through the web client. I'm actually going to do this through our C client. I just like it a little bit better. What we're going to do is we're going to rename our local storage for our ESXi hosts, because right now they're just called data store 1, data store 2, and we don't really want that. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our ESXi 1, its resource allocation. Right now it has 1 VM. So I want to go to configure, go to storage, and there we see the data store. I want to rename that to local ESXi 1. I'm going to do the same thing for ESXi 2. Because you'll notice both of them are named data store 1. What I want to do is I want to migrate this this Windows 7 machine off of the storage for ESXi. So we're going to migrate it. I just want the data store. I'm going to put that on local storage. I also want to migrate both A and B over to ESXi 1. And I want to keep all of the storage right where they're at, but I want ESXi 1 to be able to manage all of them. So we have XP Pro A, XP Pro B, XP Pro C is our template. Let's go ahead and create a XP Pro D as in Delta so that we can have 3 VMs. I want to go to templates, deploy, XP Pro D. I want to put it on 1. iSCSI 2. Customize it using the XP answer file we created earlier. I already know that I should get a error message because of the customization. There is nothing I can do about it. I've done the customization on physical equipment and it works no problem. Inside our nested virtual environment, I have encountered a few errors. So this will just be one that I will deal with. So this is what I was talking about. I already know I'm going to get this. It created our XP Pro D, but one thing it did not finish was the renaming. So I'm just going to go ahead and log into it and rename it. When I've checked the knowledge base for this problem, everyone says the same thing. It's either shared storage or it is VMware tools acting up. I've fixed both issues and it still does not work. Our VMware rep actually said it's probably just our virtual infrastructure, because since it's not supported, that's going to be their first solution. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and rename it and go from there. Okay, now that it's fully booted, I'm going to go ahead and rename it. Once it lets me. Computer name, XP Pro D. And once it's done, I'm not going to restart. I'm just going to turn it directly off. Okay, next item of business, I'm going to go ahead and remove from inventory our Windows 7 machine. That way we only have our 3 Windows 7 or Windows XP VMs and 1 template. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go back home. I'm going to open up hosts and clusters. Again, all of the VMs are on XP or ESXi1 and our XP. So what we're going to do is make sure first they're all off. Next, we're going to go ahead and right click our data center and we're going to do a new cluster. We're going to name our cluster My Cluster, and we're going to go ahead and turn on DRS and high availability. Go and click on next. We actually want it fully automated, so that way as our different hosts come online, our vCenter will actually migrate hosts to where they are going to get the best performance. I'm not going to have any of the power management enabled, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this off. That way the host will not power off at all. We're going to make sure that the host failure cluster tolerance is set to 1. We're going to make sure that all of our admission controls are set to enable. Go ahead next. We want our VMware restart priority. We're going to go ahead and leave those alone. We're going to head and our host isolation, we're going to leave them on. That way we don't have to worry about our hosts turning off. Granted, if Wake on LAN is enabled on our physical hosts, the power management isn't as bad, but again, I don't really want to chance this. For the rest of this, we're going to go ahead and leave all the defaults. We are not setting up any vMotion capacity. We're going to go ahead and leave the swap file in the same directory. Here's just double check our settings. Once you're done, go ahead and click on finish. and we should have a new cluster. So let's go ahead and migrate all machines to our new cluster. First thing you'll notice is that you cannot do VMs to our cluster. We can only do hosts. And we're going to put both of our VMs, or sorry, both of our hosts in our cluster. Right now you should get an error message because it needs to install the vSphere client on them. It will do it automatically, you just have to be patient and let it work. Okay, so once the high availability client is installed on our hosts, our cluster should show all good, and it does. Before we power this guy on, let's go ahead and double check that our VMs are all Windows XP, that they are all on ESXi 1, and they are. I don't want to drag them. So once we've done that, let's go ahead and power them up. Now it will take a minute, well, it'll take several minutes for all of them to power on, so again, be patient. Okay, so with the magic power of our DRS, we migrated all of them to ESXi 1, but we actually want to see where our virtual machines are at. They're going to use a lot of guest memory because they're still powering on, but notice that A and D are on 1 and B is on 2. It did a round robin, and since there was 3 XP machines, A went to 1, B went to 2, and then it loops back around, so D, our third one, went back to 1. If we powered off one of our hosts, then they should migrate all to ESXi 2. So our lab is done. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all of these guys are up and running, and then I will go ahead and power down one of the hosts that simulate failure. Because again, on my cluster, we're seeing A, B, and D, where they're at. A and D are on 1, B is on 2. I'm going to go ahead and look at D, because D is kind of looking like it's not fully started yet. Okay, there it is. So let's simulate a hard drive, or not a hard drive failure, a host failure. I don't want to restart it, I want to shut it down. ESXi 1, which hosts A and D, was just issued a shutdown command. And it is initiating the shutdown command. And we will see if the failover automatically kicks them over all the ESXi 2 like it should. Okay, so we did get an alert that A and D are down. And A and D did not migrate yet. I'm going to give it a little bit more time, just to make sure. But I have noticed that ESXi2, we've tapped out its resources dang near. So that does tell me that once ESXi1 turned off, that our clients were probably in the process of migrating. So this will work, it's just a matter of giving it time. Oh, and so it took a few minutes, but all machines migrated over to ESXi2. Including our template. Everything is showing ESXi2. And just to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and open up the console for our XP Pro. It's still in the process of booting up. But we didn't have to do anything. One of our hosts failed, and then immediately the VMs were migrated to a existing host and powered back up. I'm going to go ahead and power back on my ESXi1 machine. To show that when the cluster recovers, it will actually migrate those machines again. And again, it's a time thing, you just gotta let it boot, but this should be fully automated. That way if a host does fail, it's an automatic, it comes back up. That way, if for whatever reason one of the hosts actually does fail, we can have it auto navigate or auto connect to an existing host and have that host power up those VMs. You could actually also set host profiles and have machines that are just there. That way, if for whatever reason a physical host machine does go down, you can have a pool of machines that are ready just to take its place. All kind of cool little features. Okay, so that host should be coming online any second now, because it has been powered back up. So the cluster does show good now. Both hosts are there. I'm going to refresh again. The storage DRS should actually migrate them back so that they're not on one host anymore. And I have a sneaking suspicion, oh, there it goes, that it's going to move A over back. That way we'll have one on one, one on the other. And that's actually it for our DRS clusters and migration. So thank you very much.